They offered the moon. And still, they got a no as cold as NHL ice in March. Toronto Maple Leafs and Philadelphia Flyers. Two franchises with very different trajectories. Yet they found themselves at the heart of a rumor that shook the NHL behind the scenes during the latest trade deadline. On one side, a franchise desperate to strengthen its blue line and fix its defense before the playoffs. On the other, a rebuilding team with a new general manager trying to strike a balance between the present and the future. And in the middle of it all, a 30-year-old Finnish defenseman, plagued by injuries, but with a physical style and on-ice presence that still draws attention from contenders. What would lead a team like the Flyers to reject a massive offer for a player who would go on to play just 3 games before suffering another serious triceps injury, ending his season for the second straight year? This story goes beyond statistics. It reveals how the NHL's inner workings are shaped by complex decisions, invisible limitations, and gambles that may or may not pay off over time. And if you want to stay ahead of these behind-the-scenes moves and understand the pieces shifting on the NHL board before they make headlines, now's the time to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, you don't just see the news, you understand why it happens. Let's get to the facts. The NHL trade deadline closed on March 7th. Just before that, the Toronto Maple Leafs went all in on Rasmus Ristolainen. The defenseman, who had already missed most of the season due to injury, wasn't fully recovered yet, but was still drawing interest behind the scenes. According to journalist Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun, despite still playing at a high level, offered the moon represents a short-term. That was the exact expression used by a league source. The offer was considered massive. Even so, Danny Briere and his team in Philadelphia turned it down. Ristolainen remained a Flyer, but only for 4 more days. On March 11th, against the Ottawa Senators, Ristolainen suffered a new triceps injury. The result? Another season ended prematurely. The same issue that had sidelined him the previous season happened again. 2 straight years. 2 similar injuries. A player now defined more by doubt than by promise. And that's when the question haunting Flyers fans emerges. Why reject a substantial offer, likely packed with valuable assets, for a player clearly struggling to stay healthy? The answer lies between the lines and in the numbers. Philadelphia had already used all 3 of its salary retention slots for the season. Those slots were spent in the trades of Scott Laughton, Andrei Kuzmenko, and Kevin Hayes. In other words, even if they wanted to reduce the $5.1 million cap hit of Ristolainen's contract to ease a deal with Toronto, they couldn't. It was an operational constraint. Toronto, meanwhile, was seeking to bolster its defense. And despite the hefty contract, they believed Ristolainen could be that reinforcement. But with the Flyers unable to retain salary and Ristolainen carrying injury risk, the financial weight became a deal breaker. What's most interesting is that the Flyers had already received from Toronto a 2027 first-round draft pick and Nikita Grabenkin. This shows that communication between the franchises was open. We also know the Flyers are interested in young centers, which raises a possibility that Fraser Minten, or another high-value prospect, was part of Toronto's push to land Ristolainen. In addition to Minten, the Leafs have other coveted names in their system, such as Easton Cowan, who plays in the OHL alongside Denver Barkey and Oliver Bonk, and Ben Danford, a 2024 first-round pick who, interestingly, fits the ideal profile to replace someone like Ristolainen in the future. Right-handed, tall, physical. But all of that remains speculation. The fact is, the trade didn't happen. And now, both the Leafs and the Flyers are living with the consequences of that decision. For Toronto, missing out on Ristolainen wasn't the end of the world, but it may have altered their plans. Without him, the team sought a different defensive option on the market. But the idea of adding a physical, experienced veteran like the Finnish blue liner never materialized. The team continued betting on a mix of young talent and minor adjustments. For Philadelphia, the decision to keep Ristolainen now seems harder to justify. The defenseman had another season cut short by injury, is aging, and his trade value will likely be lower in the offseason. What could have been a beneficial deal might now become a burdensome contract. And so the question remains, did the Flyers make the right gamble by keeping Ristolainen, hoping he would return and lead the younger players on the roster? Or did they turn down a can't-miss offer and lose their best chance to restart with meaningful assets? Comment below. What would you have done in Danny Briere's shoes? Would you have accepted the moon Toronto offered? Or do you understand the choice to keep Ristolainen despite the injury risk? And what seemed to be just a controversial decision at the trade deadline now reveals itself as merely the first chapter of an off-season that promises to change everything in Toronto. Because of the failed attempt to acquire Rasmus Ristolainen already exposed the Leafs' limited room to maneuver, the real storm is just beginning to form. And it won't come just from trades, but from decisions that strike at the very soul of the franchise. While the silence after elimination still lingers over Scotiabank Arena, something bigger stirs behind the scenes. One of those moments that define not just a season, but an era, because more than ever, the fate of the Maple Leafs lies in difficult choices. And none is more sensitive than the future of Matthew Knies. At 21 years old, with an impressive season of 29 goals, 29 assists, and a strong playoff presence with 5 goals, Knies has proven he's not just another talented young player. He's different. He brings a physicality, the tactical intelligence, the positional awareness, and the rarest thing of all, he delivers on both ends of the ice. But now, that same player is about to enter restricted free agency. And for many teams around the league, that's the perfect opportunity. A loophole. And according to trusted sources like Thomas Drance and Harman Dial, The Athletic, the Vancouver Canucks are already paying attention. Very close attention. The British Columbia franchise, which came close in the playoffs and is looking to take the final leap, is reportedly preparing an aggressive offer. And while the Leafs have the right to match any offer, the problem is far from simple. The financial situation is delicate. The franchise is still dealing with contracts still playing at a high level and John represents Tavares, a short-term which consume a significant portion of the salary cap. And every move now comes at a cost, a sacrifice, a price. And that's where the narrative ties back to what we saw weeks ago. The Leafs offering the moon for Ristolainen, a bold, even desperate move that ultimately fell apart over details. And it clearly shows that management is willing to make daring decisions, but can no longer afford mistakes, because Knies represents Toronto's competitive future. He is the bridge between the generation still trying to justify its hefty contracts and the new wave of talent like Fraser Minton, Easton Cowan, Ben Danford, and others. But at the same time, there are risks. There always are. Some analysts point to Knies' shooting percentage, a sky-high conversion rate of nearly 20%, as potentially unsustainable. Is it a product of a hot streak or truly an emerging star with elite-level consistency? The Leafs front office will have to bet, and if Vancouver puts a big offer on the table, that bet will come at a high price, a very high price. Matching it could mean sacrificing defensive reinforcements, possibly letting go of dependable veterans, or even giving up the chance to make bigger moves on the market. Toronto is in a delicate spot. The core built around Marner, Tavares, Nylander, and Matthews hasn't delivered the glory it once promised. And now, the narrative repeats itself. The Leafs must decide whether to protect what they already have or risk it all for something new. The Knies dilemma symbolizes it all. And it's not just about what he produces in stats. It's about the silent impact he has when he's on the ice, the respect he commands from opponents, his seamless fit with different lines, and the energy he brings in clutch games. In an NHL where speed, physicality, and tactical intelligence define champions, Knies seems like the kind of piece you simply don't let slip away. But what if he does slip away? What if Toronto hesitates or simply can't match a Canucks offer? The loss wouldn't just be technical. It would be symbolic. It would confirm that the Leafs have entered a new cycle, perhaps not by choice, but by necessity. The franchise might be forced to accelerate a rebuild. It wasn't yet ready to begin. And from Vancouver's side, the opportunity is real. The Canucks have cap space, ambition, and urgency. They came close to a postseason breakthrough. They got a taste, and they know they need that final piece to push through. Knies might be that piece. A player who's already proven himself in the playoffs, who hasn't yet reached his ceiling, and who could explode under the right coaching. This potential move adds even more tension to an already unstable landscape, with the Leafs trying to maintain control, but seeing their core threatened by injury, frustration, and now backslash, a potential silent exodus. That's why the coming days, weeks, and decisions won't just be administrative. They'll be emotional. Because if losing Knies now ends up being the price of past miscalculations, Toronto will have to face a painful truth. Perhaps the project that once looked so promising needs a reset, not just in players, but in philosophy. And what about you? If you were Brad Treliving, what would you do? Would you match any offer for Knies, even if it affects the rest of the roster? Or would you try to negotiate a strategic return if Vancouver puts an irresistible proposal on the table? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. This moment is much more than just rumors. It's the redefinition of a team carrying the hopes of millions of fans. And stay tuned, because in our next video we'll dive into the true intentions of the Canucks. They're not just eyeing Knies. There are quiet moves happening out west. And when the dust settles, it may not be just Toronto that looks different. So go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. The NHL offseason is just beginning, and it promises to make headlines every single day.